to the Endometriosis Foundation of America's Virtual Hill Day. Thank you for taking the time to learn about endometriosis and why the 1 in 10 individuals born in the United States with a uterus need your help now. I'm Diana Falzone, EndoFound Ambassador, journalist, and more importantly, I'm a woman with endometriosis, a disease that nearly robbed me of my fertility, caused me to lose organs, and almost caused me to go into kidney failure. Endometriosis is not a bad period. It is a crippling, insidious illness that can lead to bowel obstruction, lung collapse, loss of quality of life, work productivity, school days, and so much more. Currently, there are limited treatment options that can cause difficult side effects and costly, invasive surgeries that are a battle to get insurance companies to cover, if the insurance companies will even cover the needed surgeries at all. In addition, there is still no cure or even a non-invasive way to diagnose the disease. Without more funding for research, endometriosis will be stuck in the dark ages, and those with it will continue to suffer in silence. Today, you will hear from our guest and panelists who will tell their journeys with endometriosis and why it's vital for us to focus on research funding to better understand the disease and most effective treatments. Thank you to members of Congress and their staff for supporting the fiscal year 2022 appropriations bills that include report language prioritizing endometriosis research. The National Institutes of Health and the Department of Defense have large programs recognizing the need to fund endometriosis research. Still, we need to ensure that endometriosis is on the list for consideration for funding. We're happy to have bipartisan support from the Congressional Endometriosis Caucus. This fiscal year, they're working to support research funding and priority report language for NIH, DoD, and the Veterans Affairs Administration. We need your help to support the Congressional Endometriosis Caucus's request for appropriations in fiscal year 2023. First, we have EndoFound's Scientific and Medical Director, Dr. Dan Martin, a community member of the Virginia Commonwealth University Institutional Review Board, Richmond, and Professor Emeritus, School of Medicine, University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis. He retired from clinical practice in 2016.
Thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure to be with you today to discuss endometriosis and the problems that it causes in our patients. Endometriosis is a disease in which tissue similar to that lines the uterus is found outside of the uterus. It grows commonly in the pelvis and uncommonly in areas outside of the pelvis, such as the bowel, diaphragm, and lungs. This can cause pain as it has an inflammatory reaction and interferes with the immune system, and can recruit not only the fibers that are close to the pain sensors, but can recruit central fibers and can include recruitment by comorbid conditions such as irritable bowel and interstitial cystitis. The majority of cases are not life-threatening, but with severe endometriosis, there can be bowel obstruction and collapsed lungs, and even more dangerous to life is the depression that comes with it, and some women going as far as committing suicide. Women with endometriosis and pain commonly have delays of 6 to 10 years or longer. There's several reasons for that, and that includes the normalization of pain, physicians thinking patients are pill-seeking, the presence of several other diseases that have similar symptoms, and no non-invasive tests to prove the diagnosis. Those problems are compounded by a lack of physician focus and lack of public awareness. We need increased awareness by patients, their families, and their physicians. We need increased education for all of those groups. It's more than just the physicians, it includes everyone. If we don't get that education, this delay is going to increase local, central, and comorbid pain sensitization and increase the difficulty in treatment. Early diagnosis is needed to focus the treatment to fit the patient before the only option left is surgery. When nodules or cysts are found on exam or imaging, or when there's long-term pain where nodules are likely, surgery becomes the only successful option. We need early treatment so that women with endometriosis can continue to go to school, work, be active in other activities, and so the pain will not interfere with their sleep, sex, and daily life. With very early treatment, it may be possible that surgery can be avoided. However, with long delays and the development of large cysts or nodules, surgery becomes more likely in order to avoid pain. We need early diagnosis for all of that. Thank you.
Endometriosis researchers Drs. Peter Gregerson and Christine Metz from the Feinstein Institute of Medical Research in New York, and Catherine Burns, PhD, and assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine in the Department of Environmental Health, will give us an update on the status of the research funding and their work.
Dear members of Congress, we are a group of researchers studying endometriosis, which affects 1 in 10 females of reproductive age. It affects teenagers, adolescents, young adults, as well as older women. It is woefully underfunded and leaves many of these women without effective and tolerable treatments and with very long delays in diagnoses. The only way to address this problem is to fund research in this area.
So one of the things that we've been working on is studying menstrual blood or menstrual effluent, which amazingly shows extraordinary differences between people with endometriosis versus controls. And that leads to our conclusion that it could be used as a non-invasive way of at least screening people who present with symptoms. Right now, in order to make a diagnosis, you need to do surgery, have laparoscopy. It's a big deal. If we had a way of saying, gee, this person really, their symptoms suggest endometriosis, and by just simply looking at their menstrual effluent, be able to say they are a candidate for further evaluation. That would radically change the landscape, because right now it takes 5 or even 10 years for people to get diagnosed.
And to do all of this, what we really need is an ask from you in Congress to pay attention to the calls for research for endometriosis, for calls for research for women's health research, and to really fund these areas of research that are so important to help the 1 in 10 women, but also studying menstrual effluent may also hold keys to a number of other menstrual health disorders or other women's reproductive health disorders that could be all combined and help us understand overall women's health.
I think the other thing that we should point out is that the technologies that are now emerging to evaluate, endometrial tissues, the lesions themselves, and menstrual effluent, as well as peripheral blood, have really exploded, so that in the last few years, it's become possible to look at individual cells comprehensively about what genes they are utilizing and what their function is. And that just was not possible 5 years ago. And so there is an incredible opportunity now to apply some of these new technologies that, are expensive, but their cost is coming down, to really gain insight into what's going on in the inflammatory tissues of endometriosis. And it's very similar to what's going on in cancer, where suddenly you can really get a handle on what exactly are these cells doing in a cancer lesion. Same thing for endometriosis.
And the importance,
go ahead.
And the importance of this, I think, to talk with Dr. Gregerson, is the importance of personalized medicine, that this can take it down to the individual level and to the per person level to really understand what is happening with each individual person.
The answers lie in research. Research needs funding. We have many investigators who want to do this research. They're capable. We have technologies. We lack the funding to do the important work that needs to be done.
Wholeheartedly agree. Thank you.
Finally, we are joined by EndoFound Ambassador Corinne Foxx and EndoFound Patient Advisors Melissa Boudreau and Latia Lee. So much for joining us today on Virtual Hill Day. You all have such impactful voices in the endometriosis community, and unfortunately, we all share a commonality of having endometriosis. Corinne, what would you like Congress to know about this disease and how they can help the 1 in 10 with this illness?
Yeah, as someone living with endometriosis, I found it incredibly difficult to get a diagnosis for multiple reasons. One, because of the lack of early education. When I was learning about my health in school, there was no mention of endometriosis. I never knew what it was. And when I did finally learn about endometriosis, I was absolutely shocked to know that 1 in 10 women suffer from something that we've never been taught before. And also, once I did get the diagnosis, I got the surgery and it cost me $18,000 out of pocket because it was not covered by insurance. And I'm one of the lucky people who could actually afford that surgery, but it's not affordable for people. And there isn't a clear path as to how to get medical coverage for the surgeries that are life changing.
Absolutely. No, it's an incredibly costly disease. It's as if you have to be rich to be sick in order to afford the only real treatment options that exist out there. And even some of the medicines out there are not covered by insurance. And I've been quoted as $1,500 for a medication that only would last me 2 weeks at a time. And that would have no health insurance coverage whatsoever. Melissa, I see you nodding away. What's your experience been like?
I mean, I agree with Corinne. Early education is so important, but just the overall awareness. People on the street have never heard this word endometriosis before. So there needs to be more research and funding and just general awareness about how serious this disease is and how it impacts every part of your life, but all the people around you, everyone who supports you in your life, they're impacted as well. This is a chronic condition, and the lack of awareness really is the first part that we really have to get out into the space. But then early education for doctors, so they understand the severity of this disease and access to care. So I live in Michigan, and there, at the time when I was going through this, there was not one doctor in the state who performed the type of surgery that you need for endometriosis. Now we have one in the whole state of Michigan. So that is unacceptable, in my opinion. So we really need to have better education. We need to have insurance support around this disease, which there's a lack of support from the insurance companies because, again, I think it all leads back to lack of awareness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Latia?
Yes. Hi. So I'm just going to piggyback off of what Corinne and Melissa said. I think definitely there needs to be more funding in research. 1 in 10 women are affected by this condition, yet we still don't have a cure. And I think it's due to lack of funding. I think women's health just in general, like there's not a lot of research. So I think we need additional funding, definitely education, especially for our healthcare providers. I mean, I'm a registered nurse, and when I was in nursing school, I was not taught about endometriosis, and I felt like if I learned it in school, I would have noticed those signs and symptoms, and I would have sought out help a lot sooner than me having a 23-year delay in endometriosis diagnosis, which affected my lungs. You know, everybody needs to know it's a system-wide disease. My lungs, my bowels, it's just not your pelvic region. And we really do need insurance coverage. There's so many women who are suffering because they cannot afford the surgeries that they need. And it affects our quality of life. Like, this is something that affects our families, our lives, our mental health. It's a really debilitating disease. So I think we need funding. I think we need early education. If I would have learned that as an adolescent, I would have also picked up the symptoms, and you could share that information with your friends and your families and sisters and aunts who also might be suffering from this disease.
Yeah, and as you all noted, early intervention, knowing those signs and symptoms, having that information available in schools so that these children, the next generation, can know what's going on with their body, to know what is quote unquote normal and abnormal, so that they can seek proper treatment early, because what we do know about endometriosis is that it can progress. And the more it progresses, because there are stages, the harder it is to treat. So getting to that earlier helps someone. And like you said, the delayed diagnosis is on average 10 years. But we've heard stories, if you just mentioned 23 years. For myself, it's 20 years. By then, it is so advanced and has affected so many more organs. And that's another thing to mention. Latia, you mentioned about your lungs. You actually went through lung collapse due to endometriosis. And again, it's learning about the disease itself, that this is not just the uterus, the ovaries, reproductive organs. This, as you mentioned, is a systematic overall condition that impacts vital organs such as the lungs. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, I just started having these lung collapses with my cycles. And at first I didn't make the connection, but when it happened the second time and it was during my cycle, I just started Googling, and the term catamenial pneumothorax came up. And, you know, and I kind of self-diagnosed myself, you know, because I was seeking help, but I really was not getting the answers that I, you know, needed or wanted. And it was actually a pulmonologist was the first person to mention endometriosis to me, which intrigued me to start researching what this disease was. And I realized, oh my God, this is me. This is what I've been dealing with for the past 20 years. But the bottom line is, if we had awareness, it shouldn't have to get to that point where a woman's lung is collapsing. It shouldn't have to get to a point where it's a 23-year delay. Like, if providers are taught very early in medical school, you know, signs and symptoms, and just how to give resources to adolescents, to young women, so they can seek the treatment early to prevent these things from occurring. Like, that's the main goal, like quality of life over everything. And a lot of us in this panel right here, we've suffered, we've been through a lot, and it could have been prevented if we were treated and diagnosed a lot sooner.
Absolutely. Corinne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, hearing your story reminds me so much of my story. I mean, I didn't have a lung collapse, but I had symptoms with my bladder where I went to a specialist and they told me that I had bladder cancer, or, you know, they suspected bladder cancer. And that was something that was terrifying for a 23-year-old to hear. And luckily I went to another doctor and another doctor and another doctor until I finally heard the word endometriosis. So I agree with you 100% that if we get the funding for research, then we have more foundation to educate our primary care providers so that they can notice the symptoms when we come in. And, you know, we're talking about these things because my symptoms were textbook. They were textbook symptoms. And I shouldn't have went to 6, 7, 8 doctors before ever hearing the word endometriosis.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with obviously what both of you are saying. And for me, I had a partial bowel obstruction, which could have killed me if I wouldn't have had surgery when I did, because part of my bowel had to be removed due to this disease. These are the things that aren't talked about. And very much like Latia and Corinne, I was a textbook case. As an adolescent, I went to my OBGYN and I told her that I had very, very painful cycles. And it was just treated as it was normal. And so that early education, the research, the funding to educate primary care doctors and OBGYNs that painful cramps are not normal. That is the first sign for some, not everybody, because the disease manifests differently in everybody, but that is the first sign. And I think I was 15 years old the first time I made that complaint. So that I could have saved part of my bowel. I didn't need to lose part of my bowel due to this disease because it had progressed so much, but because of the lack of understanding and awareness and research and just education, it landed me, you know, almost dying on a surgery table. And I think to that point too, we're talking about surgery a lot, but we also need an early diagnostic tool so we don't have to have surgery. And many people with endometriosis have more than one surgery. They have multiple surgeries, which is a burden just on the medical industry, but also just a burden on the hospitals and doctors. There needs to be an early diagnosis tool that doesn't involve us going under the knife.
There isn't enough there just aren't enough treatment options. It's been so ignored for so long that we need these funds allocated for the research, so that you said we have a diagnostic tool, that we have better treatment options, and that surgeries are so out of reach for so many people, especially if they don't have insurance. And even with insurance, there's so much, like Corinne mentioned, about out-of-pocket cost. Corinne, I also want to talk about the correlation between mental health and having a chronic illness like endometriosis, and how that does impact someone's overall life, their lost work hours, their lost school days. There's so much more to this disease than just even the physicality of it.
Yeah, it's a traumatic disease to have, because not only is getting a diagnosis can be incredibly traumatic, going from doctor to doctor to doctor, being probed, having to advocate for yourself, not being believed. I definitely suffer from PTSD from my experience going to the doctor and advocating for myself and not feeling heard or understood. And then also there is the depression and anxiety and hopelessness that comes with this disease, when you feel like the system is not working for you and there is not a clear path to diagnosis and there's not a clear path to treatment of this disease. And you lose so much. You lose your livelihood when you can't get out of bed. And I'm not a mother yet, but I could imagine being a mother and having so many responsibilities and not being able to show up in the way that you would like to.
Absolutely. If there is one thing that you could each tell a member of Congress about endometriosis and what you would like them to do for the community, please share. Melissa?
I would really like Congress to understand how serious and systematic this disease is. It affects your entire body as a person, and it affects you for your entire life. And ongoing treatment is a daily process. We need your help. We need funding. We need awareness. We need education. Please help us so others do not have to suffer, as long as all of the people on this panel.
Lydia?
Right. I just want, I'm going to piggyback off of what Melissa said, like definitely just for Congress to understand how serious this condition is. It could have killed Melissa. It could have killed me. And that it's just, we just need funding. We need the research. It affects fertility. Fertility is a whole other issue about, it just digs into that and how that's also such a financial burden on so many women who suffer from endometriosis. So we need funding, we need research, we need awareness, we need our healthcare providers to understand the severity of this, to notice those early symptoms of those women who are suffering, so they can seek out the right treatment, which is excision, which is not covered. And we need those surgeries to be covered by our insurances, to help the financial burden for so many women who can't afford it because of that exact reason.
And then finally, Corinne.
I would like Congress to know that this is not a rare disease. This is 1 in 10 women in America who suffer from this. And I believe that the number is even more because of all of the women who have never been diagnosed and will never be diagnosed and will live in pain for the rest of their lives. And they deserve medical coverage. They deserve early education. They deserve to be believed when they walk into a doctor's office. And I think Congress has the power to do all of those things.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories, for your testimony, and for continuing to be committed to the cause of finding better treatment options, more funding, and hopefully a cure one day for the 1 in 10.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for your time. A special thank you to the Bipartisan House Endometriosis Caucus chaired by Reps. Nikema Williams and Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon, and Representative David Scott and Senator Tammy Duckworth for working with EndoFound during EndoFound Awareness Month to again designate March as Endo Awareness Month, bringing much-needed endometriosis awareness. Please join our UpEndo Coalition at endofound.org/advocacy to help make a difference for your state. Thank you to our special guests and experts. We are joined by Padma Lakshmi, EndoFound co-founder.
Hi everybody, my name is Padma Lakshmi and I'm the co-founder of the Endometriosis Foundation of America. I just want to thank everybody for giving us support and being here today, all the members of Congress, as well as all of their staff, and for supporting the FY22 appropriations bills that included report language prioritizing endometriosis research. I started this foundation in 2009 with my surgeon, Dr. Tamara Sechkin, because I thought that we needed way more research than we currently have at the federal level. Endometriosis is not just a women's issue, it's an issue that touches the whole family, the whole workplace, and our very society. Because when a woman is down with chronic pain, as you suffer with endometriosis, she cannot be a mother, she cannot be a colleague, she cannot be a partner or spouse, and everybody in her circle suffers. In fact, it costs our system $21 billion a year in lost revenue, lost wages, medical expenses, the whole gamut. And so we need much more funding than we have. NIH, DOD, and the Veterans Administration all have research dollars to appropriate, and we need to make sure that those are appropriated to endometriosis. Endometriosis just doesn't affect the reproductive system, it affects kidneys and liver. It affects your digestive tract. It affects everything in the body cavity. And it is a real underfunded disease. I want to thank everyone across both, across the aisle. We've had bipartisan support with our caucus, and I'm so thankful for that because I don't think this is a partisan issue. I want to thank Representative Nikema Williams, Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon, and also caucus members Representative David Scott and Kathleen Rice. Thank you all so much. This means the world to me. For so many years, I was just out there banging my drum and I didn't feel like I had anyone else who was saying anything. Now there are so many of us who are speaking up. We just need the support from congressional members to really up the funding as much as we can for the appropriations also in FY23. And I hope we can count on your support to continue to make progress on treating and understanding this disease. I think we can make great strides just by getting actual current data that's accurate, because we believe, and we have the early data to support this, that endometriosis affects up to 30 or 40% of women of childbearing age. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate all of your help, all of your listening, and all of your support. Thank you.
Well, first, thank you for continuing to raise awareness and have this conversation so that more people can really understand what endometriosis is and the realities that those of us who are affected by this face every day. And I'm one of those 1 in 10 people who experience the pain and the missed work and the missed social life and all of the other things that come with the diagnosis of endometriosis. And so this was critically important for me as someone who suffered from this disease since I was 14 years old. And coming into Congress, seeing that there was once an endometriosis caucus and it went away because the person was no longer serving in Congress. That's one of my top priorities, was to get this caucus relaunched, because I know that without federal research dollars, that we're going to continue to have people suffering in silence from this debilitating disease. And I don't want other people to have to experience what I've experienced for so long. And so it was kind of selfish for me to relaunch the endometriosis caucus, but I know the impact that it'll have on so many people. I don't want other young people to go to their doctor and explain the pain that they're experiencing and be told, "Are you sure you're not exaggerating the pain?" Because that's what I was told at my first doctor's appointment when I spoke with my gynecologist about the excruciating pain that I was having and how I would have to miss days of school because of the pain. And then the other thing is looking long term. I'm now the mom of a very vivacious 6-year-old boy, my Carter cakes. But when I also went to the doctor after I found someone who was even willing to acknowledge the pain was real, I was told the only way to treat endometriosis or to cure it was to have a hysterectomy. Imagine a teenager being told that, well, you can get rid of this pain if you just have a hysterectomy. I mean, very matter of factly, like it was just choosing what I was going to put on to wear to school the next day. And I am happy that I had a mom who did not take that as one of the options on the table for me, so that I could preserve my fertility, so that I could be the mom that I am to Carter, and that I could continue to make sure that other people understand that that's not their only option as well. But these research dollars go a long way in making that a reality.